Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to waste anybody's time with the great speakers and artists we have here in our midst this afternoon, but let me simply say welcome to the Andrew Carnduff Ritchie program this fall afternoon, and it involves two wonderful friends who've known each other for quite some time, great figures in the arts and letters, and to introduce them is none other than our president, Peter Salovey.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you all for being here today. We have a full house, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate our guests who have drawn such a full house. I don't want to take much of their time by giving a lengthy introduction, but I've learned it's sometimes a little difficult when you use a cliche like, here are speakers who need no introduction. Some of you may know that Henry Kissinger gave his papers to Yale, and so I had the privilege of introducing him at an event, and I said, here is a man who obviously needs no introduction, and I hear somebody from behind saying, Mr. President. I turn, it's Henry Kissinger. He says, Mr. President, I may be a man who needs no introduction, but I am also a man who likes to listen to one.
So, good for Henry. That's pretty funny.
So my brother. I learned my lesson, and so I'll be very brief. We are so delighted to have David McCullough and Patrick Oliphant with us today to do a joint presentation. These are two great minds who between them have 3 Pulitzer Prizes and too many honorary degrees for me to even name, let alone count. They met, actually, for the first time in 2012 at the American Academy in Rome, and hoped one day there'd be an opportunity where they could work together in a creative way, and that is happening here today at the Yale University Art Gallery. Patrick Oliphant is currently the Andrew Carnduff Ritchie Artist in residence at Yale. In 1964, only a year after he moved to the United States from Australia, he became a nationally syndicated cartoonist, starting at the Los Angeles Times. And I know that so many of us have enjoyed those cartoons over the years. Today, his cartoons continue to run 3 times a week and are seen by millions and millions all over the world. David McCullough is a favorite son here at Yale. His research and writing on American history have captured the interest of generations. I know many of you are familiar with his books. In recent years, he has spent time here at Yale using our collections for his research, serving as an honorary director of the Art Gallery Governing Board, and visiting his grandchildren who are students in Yale College. Today, they will offer a unique reflection on the last 50 years of the American presidents, all of whom have provided, at one moment or another, good opportunities for both historical critique and cartoonish satire. But before I turn the floor over to the two of them, let me just say a word about our retiring Holcomb T. Green Curator of American Paintings and Sculpture, Helen Cooper. She announced her retirement in June. This evening, there'll be a University Art Gallery Governing Board dinner and Ritchie Lecture dinner where she will be honored. And I just want to say to Helen, who I know is over there somewhere, and I can't quite see you, but you have been such a friend to this university. You have been a fixture in this gallery, and Marta and I thank you for all that you contributed to us as we had the great privilege of living with wonderful art as a dean, as provost, and now as president in our home. I would say the great privilege of living with wonderful art that we didn't actually own, and your selections have made us look far more knowledgeable than we actually are. And for that, we are incredibly, incredibly grateful, and for everything you've done for this university. So now I would like... There she is. And so now I would like to call up Patrick Oliphant and David McCullough.
Thank you, sir. We're going up here now. Very nice, thank you. You're welcome. Stay over there. You're going to this way, aren't you? Yeah, I'm going to go up there. Okay. I'll tell you later. This is dress rehearsal. I'm
Put that in the pocket.
delighted to play the part I've been asked to do today with Patrick. And President Salovey, thank you very much for being here and for introducing us. I want to tell you that you are in for a rare thrill of an experience. I saw Patrick do what he does this way in Rome 2 years ago, and it took my breath away. It's like watching a magic show. And I think that you'll come away, I hope you will, with a feeling that many of us have that what he's doing is of immense importance, and his total body of work is a major American accomplishment in art, not just in politics and understanding of the times we have been living in. And one of the most obvious lessons of history is that it isn't about just politics and war and boring statistics and the Wilmot Proviso. It's about everything. It's about people. It's human. History is human. When in the course of human events our founding document begins. And the operative word there is human. This struck me powerfully one day when I was driving down Massachusetts Avenue and came to Sheridan Circle. I was late for an appointment, and all of a sudden hit this horrendous traffic jam. And everything stopped. And I was late, and I was getting frustrated, and I looked over at the statue of Phil Sheridan in the middle of Sheridan Circle, a very good statue done by Gutzon Borglum of Mount Rushmore fame. And I thought, I wonder how many people driving around this circle have any idea who that is. They go around here twice a day, probably 5,000 in the morning, 5,000 in the evening, 10,000 people or so. And I began to get a little down about that prospect and the fact that I was late for my appointment. And all of a sudden, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue came on my car radio and just lifted me right out of my car, my doldrums. And I began thinking, who's more important to us as a people, as a story? Is it Phil Sheridan or George Gershwin? And of course, my preference was for George Gershwin. But I thought, they're both important, but you can't leave Gershwin out. And I feel very much that Patrick Oliphant is his art form's version of George Gershwin. He is a major American phenomenon. And the fact that we're going to get to enjoy his way of seeing life and seeing our time is a privilege, believe me. I remind you, for example, of Thomas Nast, who is the one that really put old Boss Tweed down finally. And Tweed summed it up perfectly, as you may remember. He said, "My constituents don't care a straw for what you write in those newspapers. Most of them can't read. It's those damn pictures that get me." And then, of course, there was Daumier in France, and Bill Malden in our time, Herblock, and to my mind, surpassing them all is our honored guest today, Patrick Oliphant. Where are you, Patrick? He's right at work.
Yeah. Thank you. It's very generous of you. Thank you very much.
Well.
Now, would you just let me get on with my work?
All right. You, go ahead. I want to preach a little more here.
Have you got any Johnson stories?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that the phenomenon of the human face is one of the most extraordinary aspects of the human brain. When you think that there are very little differences between one face and another. Minute, fractions of an inch. And yet, you could be in Grand Central Station at rush hour with 10, 20,000 people going by, and if some old friend of yours you hadn't seen for 20 years walked by, you didn't recognize them instantly. And think what that does, what that says about the brain and how it evolved in order to know faces. We have right here in our wonderful gallery one of the national treasures in Trumbull's Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. Almost everything about that painting is inaccurate. The room is wrong, the furniture's wrong, the curtains are wrong, in the wrong place, the doors are in the wrong place. There's only one thing that is totally accurate, the faces. 48 different faces, which are all rendered superbly. Most of them, Trumbull went and did them in person. Because what was of the utmost importance was that they be identifiable and accountable. They wanted to be known for who they were. And at the time, and keep in mind when they were signing that declaration, they were signing their death warrants, but they didn't want there to be any ambiguity about who was there and who mattered. And that's really, in effect, what we're seeing now all the time in our own public, political, and national life. All these faces. But once in a while, someone comes along who can see more in a face than most all of us do, and who can make it indelible in a way that it will never, ever be forgotten. You'll never see the same face in the same way. Now, he's rendering the president who was in office when Patrick first came in 1964. I was stationed outside of President Johnson's office right after the Kennedy death to look over some photographs to be used in the USIA of the president with the photographic head of the USIA, Yoshio Okamoto, because we weren't allowed to use any photographs that the president didn't like. And I could hear talk behind the door of the White House, of the Oval Office. And I think, I wonder if I'll get to see the president. And then it was time for me to go, and I was just as I was about to leave. The door opened, and this head came out around the side of the door. And it was at a much higher level than a head should be. And I heard the only immortal words that I ever heard the president enunciate. Heard it in person, and he said, "Anybody seen my razor?" Take it from there, pal.
Got any Nixon stories?
Here he comes. Imagine he could just stand up there and do that. Nothing on the board before he touches it with a...
Well, that's all you need of Nixon, really, isn't it?
This gallery is a teaching gallery, which to me is one of the most exciting developments at Yale in the last 25 years or less. And the idea that all the different disciplines, as they say in academic life, really all the different aspects of human life, can be taught here by professors, instructors, lecturers, in virtually any department. And imagine coming here to see this work when you're studying the politics of the last 40-some years, 50 years. And what a different what a different lift it would give to the experience.
This takes a while.
Patrick, I get the feeling you have a good time doing that face.
Yeah, it comes back about once a year. There's a strange afterlife he has. And so he's good for a cartoon or two a year, even now.
I didn't know he was left-handed.
Oh, dear. That's funny.
Did you ever meet him?
No, I never did. No. That's okay.
Did you?
When I did meet once, I was his vice president. And I usually stay away from presidents or politicians in general,
Why?
because I might like them.
Would it also make it harder to be
You couldn't get to be
negative or
That's
mocking about them?
objective about someone you like. So,
Yeah.
so I generally stayed away from getting involved with them anyway, which is more easy than you think in Washington. And this guy I did meet after he was in the office, Gerald. And he was a very good fella, a nice fella.
I agree.
And that really gave me pause that, you know, you shouldn't hobnob with the enemy. But he used to bang his head on things. And it was, I used to draw him always this way. And he asked me once, he called me up and asked me would I be the entertainment at a gathering of his staff. He used to, every year, get a dinner for the ex-staff. And so they were all there, and Kissinger and all those awful people. And I don't know why I was, he was just milling around in the crowd there. And I don't know why I did this. But I took the charcoal and I walked over to him and I drew a Band-Aid on his head. You know, you can get wrestled to the ground for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The Secret Service guy came over and said, "You do that again, you'll never cartoon in this town again." So,
Well, I spent a day with President Ford at the Ford Library. He had invited me out to lecture there. And I thought he was very level, balanced, intelligent, and commendable figure. And by no means slow upstairs, by no means. And I think he's an example of how through the media or some wisecrack by another politician, these people can be typecast in the most unfair fashion. And I think his presidency is waiting for somebody to write a good book about it, because brief as it was very interesting. And I personally think that what he did to pardon Nixon was a noble and admirable in the national interest decision, which clearly cost him getting reelected. It was not to his advantage to have done so, but I do believe, and there's all kinds of subsequent evidence to indicate, that he knew this was the best thing for him to do in the national interest. So I'm a Gerald Ford fan. And I think that more and more as time passes, people will see him that way. It's interesting how our views of presidents change. When I was a boy, all excited about the 1948 presidential election of Truman against Dewey, I grew up in a very strongly, traditionally Republican family, and I was very interested in politics, and I was still in high school, and I wanted to stay up to hear how it came out, and I was too tired to do so. And the next morning I went into my father was in the bathroom shaving, and I said, Dad, who won? He said, Truman, like it was the end of the world. And about 25, 30 years later, I went home, back to Pittsburgh, and was sitting there with him after dinner, and he launched into this whole tirade about how the country was going to hell and the world was going to hell. And I'd heard much of that all my life. and then he paused and he said, "Too bad old Harry isn't still in the White House." Oh, I've got a little story too about our next character on stage here. When the Panama issue became a big event in Washington, and I was called by President Carter to come down and advise them on what their policy ought to be. My book on Panama had just been published. And I was turned over to a very nice young aide, his assistant, named Lyndon Butler, who's subsequently become a very good friend. And we were sitting in this tiny, tiny little office. And it was clear quite quickly that he didn't know anything about the Panama Canal. And so my heart went out to him because he had a real responsibility, and I wanted to help in every way I could. But Rosalie, my wife, and I were sitting on one side of his desk with barely room for our knees, and he was on the other. And I looked down on the floor, and there was a mouse trap with cheese on it by a little hole in the wall. And I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Butler, but is that what I think it is?" He said, "Oh, yes." I said, "You have mice in the White House?" He said, "Generations of them." and we can't get rid of them. And I thought, well, they have every right. They've been here for generations. It's their hereditary right. And I was thinking, Pat, maybe that's a possibility for a new series of cartoons for you about historic mice in the White House.
Yeah, that's right. You write it, I'll draw it.
Now, is there any symbolism that you're putting Mr. Carter lower than the others?
Yes. In my work at the time, he shrank until his feet didn't touch the floor, but he was also famous for I remember. He was scared of rabbits.
Oh, the rabbit. You remember the rabbit? The rabbit was in the boat, wasn't he? In a rowboat.
In a rowboat. And
Or was he swimming in the pond? I can't
he
remember.
was in a rowboat, and the rabbit tried to climb in.
The rabbit started climbing the boat.
And the image was of him pounding away at the rabbit with a paddle.
Well, imagine if you tried to put a Band-Aid on his forehead. Oh, the killer rabbit.
Yeah, the killer rabbits. Yeah.
Very good.
There's a guy that you like, David. Well, you told me you like him. And after all, he did give us one of his own begotten sons.
Oh, here he comes. I think I've known or interviewed 7 of the 10 presidents that Patrick is going to render immortal today. And one of the things that struck me, and the more I would think about it, the more it strikes me as important, is that there doesn't seem to be any common denominator about these presidents. That there's no trait, there's no running to type. Jimmy Carter is as different from Ronald Reagan as anybody could have been. And if I had to say which one I liked best, it had virtually nothing to do with their politics. And that is George Bush Sr. And if I had to ride, if I'd had to ride when they were all still with us, from New Haven to Texas with one of them, he'd be the one I'd pick. Because he's a wonderful, friendly, real man and a gentleman, and interesting, with many good stories to tell, and which he tells extremely well, and generous in the extreme. I was at his apartment at College Station, where the Bush Senior Library is. And in the apartment above his couch were 5 photographs. One was of President Bush with Margaret Thatcher, another with President Bush with Gorbachev or Ronald Reagan, the sort of the standard presidential political portraits. But in the middle, about that big, twice as big, 3 times as big as any of the others, was a picture of George H.W. Bush with Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams. And you could tell which he thought were more important in the scale of things. But it was a wonderful picture of each of them. And he explained that he awarded them some kind of presidential recognition, and they'd taken the picture in the Rose Garden. And each had signed it. And I said, what a great picture. And I meant it just as a photograph. It was a superb picture. Again, these faces, which are indelible for us. About 2 weeks later, a big tube arrives at our home, and it was a picture. He gave it to me. Now, in the letter, accompanying letter, and they were always talking about he wrote nice little notes. This wasn't a nice little note. This was a real letter, 2 or 3 pages. He explained that each of the 3 had signed 33 of the prints. They made 99 prints. They all signed all of them, and each got to keep 33 of the 99. And he said that Joe, who always professed to play only for the money, sold his to Ted. But here he's got the 33 pictures of his. He said he had a few left. And he gave me one. Now, not only was that extremely thoughtful and nice, but that's a historic treasure. It's worth a lot of money. Truly, if I were to sell it. I won't sell it. I've got a baseball player right here on the Yale team, and I think he'll get it. But it's a measure, I think, of the man. And I think Mrs. Bush is fantastic. I would not want to be her husband. She really rules the roost. But I remember, maybe some of you too, when she made her first appearance as First Lady on stage at Kennedy Center. And she walked out. This, of course, coming after 8 years of Nancy Reagan, who was a very different kind of woman. She walked out like this, and she walked up to a light blue wool suit, very nice suit, middle-aged lady. And she walked out, and she took that microphone, and she said, "Well, what you see is what you get." And I thought, good for you.
Did we get out of sequence or something?
What?
Did I forget Ronald Reagan?
No, I don't think so. How can you forget him? No, here, I think he's emerging.
I thought I may have forgotten him. But
It's in the stars, as they say.
it's his hair anyway.
I interviewed Reagan in the White House very soon after he was shot. And I thought it was wonderful that he would be willing to do an interview so soon after. But when I went in to sit down with him, I was studying to see if there was any sign of the stress or the trauma or the loss of weight or scar on his head or anything, any sign whatever. Nothing. And I was within 3 or 4 feet of him. Absolutely incredible. He looked not like an older fellow who's carefully been done up and touched up and so forth. Not a bit. And he was just as natural and as calm and as cordial as if we were old friends. And in no hurry and very, very likable. Obviously with a good sense of humor and a good sense of the fact that he had the job and he better do it.
He liked the story, didn't he?
He loved the story.
Yeah. Love to laugh, love to smile. Largest year. I don't know if that's a sign of anything.
Utterly amazing. Am I blocking your view or no? Look how that reads as a cowboy hat, just one line. Now, Patrick, you've made him bigger than everybody. You've made him bigger than everybody. Is there a reason for that?
We've got to move along here. We're running out of
Oh.
people.
And what, is there a symbolism to the umbrella that Bush is holding?
Well, that alluded to the crash in the Pacific.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Did he ever mention that to you?
No.
Quite an interesting fella, really. Even though he did give us one of his only begotten sons.
Oh, boy.
What?
Oh, gee. He's doing it.
You notice how his mouth used to hang open a lot? I don't know. I thought, made a sort of a fly trap. Oh. If we go any further, I'll be in trouble. Further to him, let's see. This is politicians, when they want to be sincere, frown a lot. A decent-sized beezer. Bear with me. You remember, remember he said most sincerely, looking us right in the eye, "I did not have sex with that woman."
Yeah.
Miss what's her name? Remember that one? After him came the only begotten Son. He should be small. Maybe give him a big hat.
Imagine being able to do that. Just in a few lines in, what, 3 minutes?
That's about all you can say about him.
That's great. Wonderful. I would like to just tell you one quick story about Mr. Bush, Jr. Entirely through the help of Ted Kennedy, we got a bill through Congress authorizing the creation of a monument to John Adams in the District of Columbia. There is nothing in our capital commemorating the presidency or the importance to our founding time of John Adams. And President Bush, H.W. Bush, was newly in office, and he was going to sign the bill. And Ted called me and said, "You should come down for this ceremony." Well, I'd never been to anything like that, and I wanted very much to do it. And so we met for lunch, Ted and I, at the Hay Adams Hotel, and then we're going to walk over through Lafayette Square to the White House. And Ted was suffering from a lot of back pain then, and it was clear it was difficult for him to walk, but he insisted he wanted to walk, and he never complained about it. So we started out to go over to the White House, I don't know, 2:15, 2:30, something like that. And all the way across through the park, he was going, "That damn president is doing this, and those Republicans are doing that, and so," and I said, "Ted, I've got to tell you, I like the president." He looked at me, he said, "Oh, so do I." Like what? Like, don't you know anything? What does that have to do with it? And I think truly that's what we've lost in Washington now. Because you differ with somebody, you don't have to consider him your enemy. And the people that could work that way, like Howard Baker and Alan Simpson and others, are desperately needed back in office.
Isn't that right? Yeah. Well, let's see. The guy in the bed there also gave us this.
I asked Patrick last night if ever he just started drawing and an idea came to him through the drawing, and he said very rarely. And as remarkable as his drawings are, his talent is, really, there's nothing like it right now. Maybe never has been. But to think that he's still doing 3 cartoons a week. So he has to have 3 ideas a week. And his ideas are always original. And one of my favorite aspects of his work is the little character he includes down at the bottom, whose name is Punk.
Punk, yeah.
And I asked him, when did Punk emerge? And he said, "Oh, I brought him with me from Australia." And we talked about how the trouble he had getting through customs. And but think of that, every new idea 3 times a week for 40-some years. That alone, many people have a staff to help do that. His staff is all right up there in his head. Oh, brother. You know who's emerging, don't you? Yeah. Now, consider all the Yaleys we have up here. Really, those who aren't are the exception, which may make a comment that we don't want to think about. But look how much of it's in the eyes and the teeth, and yet we get it of who it is. It's remarkable.
CREAM. Good old Hillary. Don't like dynasties, do you?
I'm sorry, what?
I don't like dynasties. We're getting another Clinton dynasty now.
Oh, another Clinton
Yeah,
dynasty.
They're breeding
What does this say?
cream.
Cream. Oh, cream.
Billy Dunlap says about me, don't listen to him. It's English is his second language.
Yeah.
Anyway, where was I?
I tried to take a lot of courses in the art school as an undergraduate, and particularly portrait painting and drawing, and studied with Dean Keller, who was a wonderful portrait painter and whose works hang around the university in many places and in the lobby at the Yale Club in New York. And he was a terrific teacher in that he made you really learn anatomy, drawing, face ears, everything. And Joseph Albers had taken control of the department of the art school, and Dean Keller had been banished, in effect, to a little turret room up in one of the old sections of the old art school, and didn't have any students. So I went up to see him and asked him if I could be his student, and he said if I could round up 7 other students, he had to have 8 students in order to qualify, he would teach the course. Well, I did, and he did. But one day I was sitting in a drawing class taught by another professor, and we were busy drawing one of our fellow students, it was her turn to pose, sitting in a chair, just wearing what she had on that day. And we're all working away, and all of a sudden this voice from behind with a decided German accent said, "You have to ask yourself, is she Romanesque or is she Gothic?" And it was Albers. And instantly I knew exactly what she was. She was very Gothic. It was thin, and I thought, what a brilliant analysis from this man who's famous for the homage for the square. He knew a lot more than just the dear old square. What we have emerging here now?
I was drawing him already, but I just want to do him again.
Oh, I know. This is one of Patrick's more celebrated images, and I asked him if by chance this had emerged just from fooling with the pencil, and he said it had not. And he's done, I think, more than one version of the president in this form. He was not asking is he Romanesque or Gothic, but is he on an island somewhere far off in the Pacific? Yeah. Yeah.
With no ears.
Yeah.
He doesn't hear a thing.
Oh. Oh, he doesn't hear anything. Oh, I missed that symbolism. Yeah.
Then I thought I'd put someone down here.
Is that punk?
No.
No. Oh. Here, I'll get this for you.
Oh, that'll be $5.
There you go.
Oh, that's what I'm going to do next. Okay. Baron von Rumsfeld. Made a perfect Prussian general. Just a lot of this stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course,
Yeah.
what's wrong with me? I take issue with your supposition that there is no common thread through
Yeah.
these things. You think they're all different, they're all wonderfully individualistic,
And I know you can prove they aren't.
and I'm just about to do that.
All right. Wait till you see this. Talk about sleight of hand.
Does anybody remember Gold in My Ear? And then you just add some hair. Gold in My Ear. Okay. A little bit more hair. Okay.
Okay.
That's all I know.
Ah. Wonderful.
Thank you, buddy.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks. Look at this guy. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you, David. I want to let all of you know we have a wonderful reception out in the mayor lobby for all of you to enjoy, and I want you to also know there are 36 of Patrick's political cartoons on the wall there. There are another over 100 up in our prints and drawing study room for students and faculty to be seeing this semester. We'll be rotating a new group of them in the following week. So please enjoy the artwork and just the way many of you are enjoying this wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, David, for a fantastic afternoon.